Welcome back to Achieving Unlimited Health. In our last few episodes, Dr. Cima walked us through nutrition, body composition, toxicity, and hormones, the chemical foundations of the triune of health. Today, we're grounding all of that science in something measurable, your blood work. Dr. Cima will show us how a simple set of labs can reveal what your body really needs, the foods, the nutrients, and habits that really help you function at your best. So let's dive in. Hi, Dr. Cima.
How are you doing today, Layla?
Good, good. Always so excited to talk to you.
So am I.
This is such a good episode, so let's just dive in. So, when did you really start to learn about nutrition?
Actually, it was my whole life. I mean, being brought up Italian, I remember watching my grandmother make, the Italian meal. She'd made pasta from scratch, and her mother was sitting there watching her while she was doing all of that. And then even my grandfather, even my father, they always had a garden, always raising tomatoes, grapes, salt, parsley, and all different things like that. So in actuality, I was just always, and my grandfather owned the supermarket. So we always had the best food, the best of everything. It was pretty much, that's how I learned it. I knew that that's exactly one of the things that you had to do in order to be healthy. And then my father always preached to me about, eating healthy foods. And if you eat junk, your body's going to be like a junkyard, and that's what you don't want to do. So that was always pounded into me. And I was kind of like taking supplements and things like that when I was probably 8 or 9 years old. And then as I got into my teenage years, it's kind of funny how things went on. I got very much into boxing. And with boxing, you have to make weight. And you have to eat a certain way because you need stamina for all the rounds that you're going to go through. You want to make weight. You want to make sure that you're there. You don't want to kind of start sweating it out the day before, because then you'll lose a lot of energy and a lot of stamina and all the rest. So even through my boxing career, not even knowing it, it was like, oh, you had to still learn how to eat. I had to make sure I had eaten a lot of protein and eating a lot of different things that would help me benefit but keep my weight down. So it was kind of like just always like nutrition was always following me around my whole life. And then once I, got more involved, let's say nutrition, I was already now in college. So it was a really, really good thing for me to start doing at the very beginning. So I knew at that point, I knew nutrition was going to be part of my life, definitely, whether I became a doctor or I didn't.
Absolutely. And I know you didn't originally plan on being a doctor, so nutrition was always important, even prior to knowing that you were going to be a doctor.
Yep, correct. It was a great process to go through, not even knowing that, I was going through it at the time, but how much it really helped me, kind of like understand diet and nutrition way before I even understood diet and nutrition.
With your background and understanding nutrition and nutrition being such a big part of your life, even prior to becoming a doctor, when you did start practicing as a doctor, why a blood test? Why did you decide to really test for blood tests?
At the beginning, when I first started to practice, there was a lot of doctors, chiropractic physicians doing nutrition, but their diagnostic tools were either questionnaires, or there was an applied kinesiology that utilized muscle testing to test different supplements on your body and different foods. And then there was, iridology, where they would study the eye and try to determine nutritional deficiencies that way. And there was a number of other ones, and I kind of looked at all the ways you can, look at nutrition and use diagnostic tools. None of those diagnostic really, you couldn't speak to a medical doctor about muscle testing. He'd look at you and go, that's voodoo. Or, if you talk to him about acupuncture, meridian, nutritional products and things, again, that would be voodoo to them. So utilizing the blood test was really probably a great way, because everybody utilized that tool. Whether you're a medical doctor, chiropractor, osteopath, witch doctor, it didn't really matter. You used a blood test, and that was the common tool for everybody to utilize. But, the other things that had to happen was that when I was first practicing, I said, okay, what do I need to know about my patients? Was it something where I couldn't just put everybody on one diet? That was not. And again, people come in who's a diabetic, who has their gallbladder removed, who has, their ovaries removed, or have problems with their colon, or problems with a lot of other health issues that would basically, create a lot of problems with your overall health, but you couldn't be able to diagnose that without a blood test. So the blood test kind of told me what kind of glands and organs were malfunctioning, which was important because all doctors utilize that. As your biochemical blueprint, I can see your biochemical fingerprint. That's even better. Everybody has their own fingerprint. So in other words, your blood test and my blood test would be totally different. If we did another evaluation, we could pick and choose, like that's Leila's blood test, because it's going to have certain ranges and certain tests within those ranges that would indicate that is your biochemical finger. Same thing with me, same thing with everybody else. So the first question it did answer was like, how do I determine diet for a patient? Because that would be really, really important. And the second thing was, how are the glands and organs doing in the patient's body, so that this way we can kind of utilize nutrition products to help repair and rebuild the gland, as opposed to giving them drugs and hormones and so on and so forth. So I had to really get a good idea as to how I was going to be able to do that. And the blood test was the perfect vehicle for that. And it was interesting because as I started to get involved with blood tests, I met the two doctors that were really involved with putting together nutritional products based on gland and organ dysfunction, and also like what kind of a diet that patient would need. So it wasn't like, one size fits all, and each particular person now had their own biochemical fingerprint, so to speak, and I can then get a good idea as to what was going on. And also the blood test too it's objective. It doesn't, it tells you it's your cholesterol's high, your sugar's high, or your hormones are low. There's no getting around it. It's just there in black and white. So it was very objective, and it was used by all professions. And it could tell me the two most important things they need to know: what kind of nutritional profile the patient should be on, and what supplements and tissue concentrates they should take to repair and rebuild those glands. So it hit everything, 1, 2, 3, and it was really a good way for me to kind of like explore it. It was interesting because, like I said, it kind of like made it really simple, because if you really understand the blood test, it has so many different indicators, so many different kinds of problems. And you can kind of look at that and really get a good understanding of biochemically what's going on. That was my main goal for doing that. It worked out really well, but at the time, again, we were really never well versed on blood chemistry analysis, even blood tests, and nutrition as well, because going through chiropractic school, it was a great education, but they spent very little on nutrition. They always talk about the medical profession that never got nutritional programming or teaching. The same thing with a lot of the other professions. I saw that, nutrition was kind of like pushed aside. And yes, a lot of doctors utilize it, but it's the old, situation where you got this symptom, here's a product. And it used to be the product of the month way back in the 80s. And no matter what the health problem, there was a product out there that could take care of it. And it's not that simple. The biochemistry of the body is pretty intense, and you really have to understand what's going on. Then you can kind of go back and say, okay, this is the kind of diet you should be on, and this is the kind of supplements you should be on. And the best thing about a blood test is that, a lot of times patients take supplements, and I'll say to them, well, why are you taking it? Well, I heard that it was supposed to be good for this. I heard it was supposed to be good for that, but that's all I know. I said, well, is it helping? I think so. I don't know. But with a blood test, you got the numbers. You have, let's say, if you have a cholesterol that's very high, 350, you do a follow-up blood test and it comes down to 250, then whatever you were doing nutritional-wise was really helping. And the same thing with the hormones, the same thing with any other test that was, let's say, out of range. So it was a really eye-opener for me to figure that out. But it took a lot of study and a lot of understanding to put the whole thing together, because you really have to be an expert in nutrition. You have to be an expert in biochemistry. You have to be an expert in endocrinology. And so just any one of those topics is just mind-blowing. Forget about like all three together, trying to figure out how the body worked. So that was one of the things when I first started getting involved. I knew I had to write a lot of the information. So one of the doctors, Dr. Ken Brockman, he was the one that determined like how to decide like what glands or organs may be malfunctioning. I even called him up. I even went out. He was living out in Nebraska. And I went to visit him, and we put together a manual because I wanted him to teach a course. And so he gave me a lot of insight as to what was going on, because I spent 3 or 4 days writing this manual with him. And so anytime I had a question about like why he says this, he would answer it. So we became really close, really friendly, and he was just brilliant. He was like way before his time. I remember, and you'll probably be asking me this question. It's like, when was the first time you really wanted a blood test and you realized how important it was? It was utilizing his work. One of my closest friends, went to a seminar up in Orlando, and it was about, I think he said there was 100, 200 doctors in on it. Wow. So he said that this guy, Dr. Brockman, sat down and he was analyzing tests So it was interesting because I had a patient that had a blood test right in front of me. And I said to my friend, I said, well, I'll tell you what, I have a blood test here. Could you tell me certain things? He said, yeah, sure. So he says, okay, read this off, read that off, read that off, read this off, read that off. So I read them off, and he started telling me all about my patient. It was like he analyzed, he treated her, he examined it, he saw her. He never saw her in his life. He just like looked at her blood work, was able to predict and do things that I was amazed. So that's what really got me into the blood chemistry analysis to begin with. Seeing that what he could do without even seeing my patient, I said that's unbelievable. So that's how I really started. And I said, I got to get really involved with this. And everybody who I speak to about it, whether it's a doctor or a lay person, they love the idea. They love it because, their doctors are, running blood chemistries, running labs on them, but they don't tell the patient anything. They'll tell them, oh, your cholesterol's a little bit high, you got high sugar, and maybe we'll give you some kind of medication, for this. But the reality is, without a blood test, you can't figure any of this stuff out. That's how important it really is, especially with diet, because most people today, and this is the biggest thing with all my patients, it's like, I don't know what to eat to lose weight or to gain. I mean, most of the time it's lose. Nobody wants to gain weight. Very few people come in and say, oh, I need to gain weight. That's like a misnomer. But like I said, in today's society, most people are either overweight or obese or morbidly obese. And it's not getting better, it's getting worse. So, and it's just really, really just simple to understand what it is that you need to do as long as you have a blood test. Because then you can at least share with the patient what's going on, and then share with the patient what tests mean what. Because we really educate them on the blood testing program itself, too. And so when they get their report, besides me speaking to them about it, they get a better understanding of what's going on and what labs we want to change in the near future to make things better and better. So they have a really good grasp. So between consulting with them, give them a ton of information, and just following up with them, we can really put together a good profile for them, and they start losing weight. They start feeling better. And it's like, I've just been doing this now for decade after decade after decade. I keep on seeing the greatest results. One of the biggest things that I see out there with a lot of patients, thyroid issues, and especially with women. And with the right diet, with the right supplementation, you can change thyroid, production of T4 almost immediately. So there were so many different things that I saw happen, changes with the blood chemistry analysis. I said, this is just amazing. So that was what I really focused. I said, I got to learn all this stuff so I can present it to not just to lay people, because, once you get the whole concept and understand it, which is pretty intense. I mean, my blood chemistry book for doctors is somewhere between 650 and 700 pages. There's a lot of information. In fact, I forget half the information that I put down there. I got to read it, and sometimes I read it and I go, wow, I did a pretty good job. I can't even understand it, but I did a good job. So I went into so much minutia with the blood chemistry analysis, and then I started to realize, you don't need to go into that, when you're establishing nutrition for a patient. And then even with my program, created it so that when the doctor kind of utilizes it, puts all the information in with his patients, he can he can look at it and click on certain things. It'll tell him all about the labs, all about the organ or gland that we're talking about, all about the supplements that we're recommending. So it's an educational tool for the doctor as well as a diagnostic tool, that's what I want. Like I said, there's so much detail. Even if I talk to doctors, when I do a seminar for doctors, it's 2 weekends to get them to really truly understand what's going on. And at the end of 2 weekends, I'll be honest with you, I think they're just confused at that point because inundated with so much information.
Absolutely. Overflow of information. And would you say there was maybe a specific moment in your practice when a patient's blood results completely changed how you approach nutrition and supplementation?
There were so many. Like that first patient that my doctor friend was telling me all about, it was like, that's what really sold me on it. So I said, give me the book. I want to know who the doctor was. I want to really learn all about it. And then as I started utilizing it, and again, I wasn't sure, about nutrition and about how well this was going to work. And then as I started to, do it with a lot of patients, I started to see big changes, whether it was a lot of it was with weight. They wanted to lose weight. So it was looking at their blood chemistry, and they would tell me, Was there a particular gland or organ that was preventing the problem with the weight? Was it more of a nutritional thing that was, was it with the diet or the amount of food that they were eating or the combinations of food that they were eating? So it really made me decide, when I'm watching all these different patients, not just one, it's just like week after week, month after month, seeing these patients come in with all different kinds of health issues and helping the majority of them. The ones that would basically stay on it, they always got the help. And ones that it's not going to work. They're just going to kind of be floundering around through the rest of their life as far as nutrition goes. So it's going to be a problem with weight. They try to take it off, think they want this crazy diet, that crazy diet. And eventually you lose the weight, but it all comes back and more.
And for listeners who have maybe really only heard their numbers from doctors, how do you help them really see their blood work as a map, not just a report? So
Well, that's pretty much what I like to do with them. It's like I look at the test, I look at all the different numbers, and I pick the tests to the ones that are really far out of range and explain to them about how that test relates to that gland or organ. So if they come in, and like I said, they might be coming in and they might have a problem with metabolism. Their metabolism at this point, especially people in their 40s and 50s, whether it's a male or a female, especially more with females, because you have really a lot of changes with the hormones between 40 and 50. It starts with the menopause, but then, with the men, it's menopause. So they have the same issue. Their hormones are starting to drop too as well, because they haven't been as physically active, and they want it in the process of raising a family or dealing with just life and work and stuff like that. They don't work out the way they used to do it. They don't eat the way they used to do it. They eat what their kids are eating at night. A quick little meal that you can buy anywhere. So it kind of distorted all their nutrition as time goes on. So I see these guys in their 40s, and they're 20, 30, 40 pounds overweight. And just the majority of them have always big bellies. Their bellies are always big. It's just, that's where, a lot of the stuff just hangs out. It just literally destroys the organs as time goes on, just by belly fat. Just squeezing the organ and choking the organs to death, so to speak. So when you're talking to the patient, I want them to understand, like, this is their problem. These are the tests that we're going to look at. We're going to make sure that we change. And so these are the diet you want to be on. These are the kind of supplements you want to take to do that. And then the beauty about it is, like I said, you do a follow-up. Follow-up then tells you, like, did you do what you were supposed to do? Does it need more time? You start to see, they certainly are starting to change, but you're not there yet. Because sometimes the conditions are chronic and they've been there for decades, so it's not gonna occur right away. And I can determine their metabolism through that same blood test. So I can look at the blood test and say, is your metabolism really sluggish? Which I see with a lot of women in their 40s and their 50s. They had maybe 2 or 3 kids, and they've been kind of out of exercise. They do some exercise on and off, on and off, on and off. And then all of a sudden they're like in their late 40s, early 50s, and then the hormones start to slow down, and then the weight starts coming on. And then they try to go on all these fad diets, which they never work. I mean, out of all these decades, the one thing I have to say is that fad diets don't work. They never did, they never will. And the same thing with all this, back then they used to do diet pills and stuff like that, all kinds of other pills, potions, and lotions. And now they're doing it with the hormones and trying to do it with the diabetic medication. And again, that's not going to work. It's when I see, patients on that, they don't even look good. They might have to drop 10, 15, 20 pounds, but they don't look good. They just look lethargic. They look like drawn out. They don't even look healthy. So it's something that, they're trying to get the weight off, but it's not going to work. It's going to just literally make the metabolism more sluggish than what it is.
And when you are designing personal nutrition plan for patients, what are the biochemical markers you really focus on first?
They're all important. And it's the ones that are out of range the most. That's the ones that are the key to me. So when I look at and I scan the whole blood test, I'm looking at all the markers that I put down there. We use about 72 different blood test markers to really assess overall biochemically what's going on with the patient. And then you'll see one of the markers is in orbit. And then, it's kind of okay, how do we work with that? So like, for example, if it's like an enzyme like SGPT, that would be an indicator of a problem with your liver. Depending on how high that is, that's going to determine like how bad it is. And then when I see the liver situation going on with the SGPT, I know the liver has like 500 known functions. So then we'll look at other clusters of tests to assess, like, is the liver causing the problem with this gland or organ? So it kind of gives you like this, passageway of trying to figure out what it is, and just by looking at the numbers. And you let the patients know, like, these numbers are not well, then they're either too high or they're too low. And then we really educate them on those markets, tell them that those are the indicators we're going to use to assess what's going on with your liver or your thyroid or whatever. And a lot of things that the blood test does, which is really cool. You can really assess, like, it's never one gland or organ. It's always that one gland or organ impacting another gland or organ, impacting another gland or organ, impacting another one. So you might have 3 or 4 different glands or organs that are all, let's say, a combination of the same particular problem with the liver. So as long as you know if you can get the SGPT down, you're going to be able to get all these other markers down too as well. So again, each person is unique. It's their own biochemical fingerprint. So when I look at their labs, I see some craziness with their labs, whether it's with the urine analysis, whether it's with what they call the CBC differential, which would determine what's going on with the patient from a perspective of their immune system. We can get a really good idea. And then explain that to the patient, nice and slow. All I know is that the doctors, when they do a lab with a patient, this is typically what I hear all the time. Nah, he said, my cholesterol's fine. Or nah, he looked at it, he didn't say anything. Or and I said, well, what did he say about this? No, he didn't really say much about it. And so they never really give the patient, any information about that. The only time they'll do it, they go, oh, your cholesterol's too high. Your sugar's too high. And that's about as far as them go. And they'll say, well, your cholesterol's too high, we'll give you a statin. And there's pretty much, as far as cholesterol being high, if you look at it from a glandular position, there's like 72 different combinations of glands and organs that can affect your cholesterol levels besides that. And so most of the people that, come in, and the doctor doesn't have the time, they'll just say, take a statin. It's real easy. Why would they evaluate a whole blood test to tell you to take a statin anyway? And that's what they do. So, and it's the same thing with a lot of patients. They'll go, the doctor looked at it and said, there's really not much there, or there's something there, but you should take, some hormones, or you should do this, or you should do that. And that's kind of like the way they want to go. And not saying that you shouldn't do the hormones, but if you're going to do them, what you want to do is you want to do things nutritionally that'll help improve the organ or gland that you're giving the hormones to. I let people know this, and this is important. If you give hormones to, let's say, a female, like estrogen, or progesterone, or testosterone, what you really are doing is you're shutting the gland down. Because if you're giving the gland the hormones it's supposed to produce, it doesn't produce it, so it atrophies. It's kind of like when you work out, your muscles get bigger and stronger. You stop working out, muscles atrophy, you get weak, and that's what happens. It's the same thing with the glands, especially the ones that produce the hormones. They get to a point where it's like, no, we need to get the support, but they'll give you the support, but that'll make the gland weaker. That makes sense? But even with the thyroid, I've had women on thyroid medication sometimes for decades, been taking it for decades since they were in their 20s. It's like, why you keep on taking it? I just got to keep on taking it. But it's literally causing a lot of damage to their thyroid. And then the thyroid has big impacts on the liver, so it's like really understanding the physiology of the body too, to figure out, which gland or organ is the culprit out of all the 3 or 4 that you're dealing with. Or is it just 2 or 3 different situations going on in the patient's body? So you can kind of get a really good feel. And the thing that we do with a blood test, which most doctors don't do, is that when you get a blood test, you have a high and a low. And the high and low ranges indicate if you go below that or you go above that, that's considered a pathological condition. When they say pathological, we're talking maybe cancer, heart disease, some kind of degeneration that's going on in the body. We don't want to wait to that point because that's what happens with most people. So we tend to narrow the ranges down mathematically. So instead of the range being, let's say, thyroid T4 would be 4.5 to 12. So by the time you are going down to like 5.5, I'm starting to say you have a tendency towards a problem with your thyroid. And then we can look at other factors to see, is it the thyroid? Is it the pituitary that's controlling the thyroid? Or is it the hypothalamus controlling the pituitary that's affecting the thyroid? So it gets kind of like, you have to be pretty much, an expert at that particular. But to then explain it to the patients is really great. It's nice and simple. So they get a really good understanding with their labs. And I give them, there's usually 3 consultations that they get. So this was the first time they go, home. They got a lot of reading to do, this patient report. Then any questions that they have, they can email me or text me and just, what does this mean? So by the time they're finished, they really have a good concept of what. And within the first 2 or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, they're already losing some weight. They're already like having more energy. They're feeling much better. They feel like more grounded. Those are the results of them. As time goes on, they drop their weight. Then the second part of the whole thing, especially with weight loss, is with nutrition, is also exercise. It's got to be a certain kind of exercise. Why exercise? What do you do? Why walk? It's not exercise. I know it's nice that you're walking, but no, it's not the kind of exercise that's going to really, pull a lot of stuff out of your body. But it does help. It's not going to go much further than that. There's all the work back in the 80s for weight loss that they were doing. Everything was aerobics, losing weight, and decreasing the amount of calories. You can't do that to your body. You just can't do it, because over time it's just gonna day against what you're doing and fight you on.
And I know you've mentioned this quote before, let food be thy medicine and medicine be thy food. So, with that quote, how does modern blood analysis bring that idea, that ancient idea, to life in a practical, science based way?
That's the beauty of it. Food be like medicine, medicine be like food. Comes from Hippocrates, the father of modern medicine. And they don't even follow it. If you look at, he's the father of modern medicine, and he's talking about foods as opposed to, medicine, and nobody's even following it. Most doctors don't. They'll talk about it. Some doctors may say some things about it, but the majority don't know anything. They never were really trained in it. It's just like, you got this symptom, these the tests that came out, we give you that drug. You got that symptom, we give you this drug. You got that symptom, we give you that drug. It's kind of like, that's all they really know. That's the whole gist of the blood test. It's like, instead of taking medications and all the other stuff that you have to take, do it with foods. It's really simple to do it with foods if you understand what's going on. And most doctors really wouldn't disagree with that, especially if you have 40, 50 pounds overweight and you do the evaluation and you lose 15, 20, 25 pounds, the doctor would be thrilled about it. So, and then doing it without any kind of medication, that's the way you want to do it. And I'm not against the use of medication. I'm against the abuse of it. I'll give you an example. I think that we make up, might be a little stats, but we make up probably 7 to 8% of the world's population. We take 70% of the drugs. So 70%. So I think we're being overdrugged, the United States. So that's a big issue. And, you can go even further than that, because now everybody's concerned too is health and health insurance and all the other stuff that's going on. And the whole system is not going to work. It's not going to work because everything's built on, what the medical profession or medical establishment needs. So if you go and you have a problem with, let's say, your thyroid, my patients will come in and they'll run clusters of MRIs, CAT scans, echocardiograms, and on and on and on and on and on. At the end of everything, they'll tell the patient, they don't see anything. Or they'll say, the MRI shows that, but the CAT scan shows this. So it's pretty much like it's a wash. So we don't know what's going on. So that's what happens. So as time goes on, if you don't do things to kind of prevent the disease from occurring, it's going to occur. So our goal is narrow those ranges down instead of keeping that 4.5 to 12, get it between, let's say, 5.5 and 8. So if you're like at 5.0 or 5.1, we're starting to show you, yes, you have a tendency towards a problem. Let's support it now as opposed to let's wait. Because that's what doctors will do. Well, it's bad, but it's not that bad, so we'll wait. What do you mean wait? What do you want with the tumor to grow to a point where you can now see it? And now it's life-threatening. You don't want to do that. The functional medicine way Actually, we do have a medical doctor on staff. We have an osteopath on staff that does a lot of the medical stuff for us too. I think that's the way it should go. I think you should have, you know, programs where you have functional medical doctor, functional, let's say, traditional medical doctor evaluating the patient and letting the patient decide what it is they want to do. Because most of the stuff that you do with medicine is it's pretty intense. It's pretty, it's hard on the patient overall. And if you can do something that would be a lot easier on them and, create less problems, that's the best way to do it. But when they start going in doing surgeries and stuff, it's the worst thing in the world as time goes on. As much as they say, oh, we're going to get good results, most of the time they don't. I see a lot of that failure. So I can't say that but it walks out of, surgery is a very big success. And if you look at just the overall health of the United States today, it's deplorable. You know where we rank? I think I told you this in the last one of the other ones, where we rank in overall health among nations, civilized world. We're like 68. I mean, we're number one in military might. We're number one in the economy, but then 68 in health. How does that make sense? When you lose your health and the country loses their health, number one, the expenses go through the roof. Number two, the person loses many, many years of, say, productivity because they can't do it. They can't do it for whatever reason it is, but those are the things that are really occurring right now. And they're only getting worse, and they're always getting way too expensive. Without insurance now, there's no way, shape, or form you can go to a doctor, he starts running tests, that you can even afford that. And you can't even afford premiums anymore. Just going through the roof. I remember back in the early 90s, I would have staff of 15, and I would pay for their health insurance. So every month you'd have to pay the premiums for all your staff. And at that time, it was like $1,500 for 15 staff members. And the insurance would pay 80% of everything at that time. Not anymore. If I had the 15 staff right now, it's got to be $4,000 or $5,000, and they still don't cover anything. So, and they don't cover anything as far as your health goes. They call it health insurance. That's an oxy. That's sickness and disease insurance. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like getting to the point where no one's going to be able to afford it, except, if you're on some kind of governmental thing.
Even with insurance, it's expensive to go to the doctor.
Yeah, no, it's extremely expensive. So it's like at this particular point, if you can start taking care of your health, improving it, and learning about your health. Because people think that, why do I have to do this? And when they come in for treatment, it's like, do I have to keep on coming back? It's kind of like when you clean your house, you only clean it once and you never clean it again. You get your car, you buy a new car, and you never have it checked or serviced. No, you have to do it all the time. Because you're always under the gun, you're always stressed out chemically, physically, and mentally. And you need some support and some help. But you're the one that has to do it. You're the one that has to learn because you live in your body. You know what it's like. And you can really let the patient, let the doctor know exactly what's going on, what you'd like to do. As long as you have a patient that's really interested in taking care of their health. Oh, I take some supplements. That's okay, but your diet has to really, show like what you're doing, how you're eating, and you're able to repair and build the body the way you're supposed to. Because there's three things that food does. And, I'll talk to doctors about this. I'll say, what does food do for your body? They don't even. There's three things. It produces all the energy necessary for survival. It produces all your body parts. You have 100 trillion cells that have to be repaired and rebuilt every 6 months to a year. And you have to produce all the chemicals necessary for survival. It's enzymes, antibodies, hormones. So it's kind of like that's the way you use food. Use it like, oh, I want to go and have a butterball turkey today. I feel like I have to have a, cheeseburger with French fries and a Coke. That's nice, and you can do that, but you can't abuse that. And it's like, as long as you know what you're doing, you can always counteract. So when I tell people, I say, you don't have to get crazy with this. We'll help you put together a nutritional profile that'll be easy for you as far as the foods will be easy to prepare. Not very expensive. You're going to get the most benefits from it. That's our goal. So when the patients are starting to do this, I know that they're going to live a lot longer and a lot healthier. So, from the chemical perspective, that's one of the main reasons why I got involved with nutrition, because I knew how important it was. And they didn't stress that in chiropractic school. They just stressed like, if you do the chiropractic, the manipulation, you're going to get people healthy, which is true to a degree, but it's only, if you look at the whole triune of health, chemical, physical, mental, emotional, it just works on the physical side. It doesn't do anything for the chemical and, pretty much for the mental, emotional. It does somewhat, but not enough to really create a big difference. Because if you sit down and like, well, I'm getting adjusted all the time so I can eat anything I want to eat and I can drink anything I want to drink. No, that's not the way it works. And in fact, it was funny because I had, not really funny, some of the doctors who taught us in chiropractic school, yeah, chiropractic, if you get chiropractic, you'll be healthy. One of the guys that was like what they call a straight chiropractor, so he did, he dropped dead of a heart attack at 68. So I'm not really like, when I start to see that stuff, it's kind of like, no, it's chemical, physical, mental, emotional. And if you follow that the way you're supposed to, you'll be healthy. But you have to learn about that. You have to learn about it. They never taught you that. That's one of the things that if I had a way to doing this, and I don't know what RFK Jr. is going to do, you have to put this in the schools. So the kids, when they were like in the first grade or second grade, they're being taught about nutrition and health and wellness. And that should be part of the curriculum for everybody. So by the time you get, out of even grammar school, you're kind of well-versed in what you should and shouldn't eat. And then take these stupid these lunches that they give the students that are just nauseating. Try to give them some healthy food. That would be really, really helpful to them. But no, they just want to snack on crap and all the rest. That's not going to help. It kind of just gets them, into a position where as time goes on, I'll just do whatever I want to do. I'll drink what I want to drink, I'll eat what I want to eat, and all the rest. I grew up in, like I said, a household where, my mother always prepared the food. When I got to my teenage years, was I eating junk food? Yeah, I was like a typical teenager. But I always knew in the back of my mind that stuff was really the most beneficial for me. So, but the good part about that is my mother always had food. So Monday to Sunday, it was like we had good meals, good dinners. She always prepared lunch for me. We always ate breakfast at home. And very rarely did we ever go out to eat. Maybe like for a special occasion, like once a year. That was about it. There was always like for Chinese food. We just made Chinese food. That was about as far as we went. So it was like, I kind of like was, created that way with eating right and all the rest. And then even when I went into college, I was an agricultural major. And so I watched even back then, they were talking about how bad the foods were back in the 60s. I mean, today they would basically be yelling and screaming. And they were comparing it like 20 years prior into the 40s where food was grown more for quality as opposed to quantity. And the things that they do to adulterate the foods today, it's pretty pathetic. So the more crap they put in, they do it so the food can last longer, it looks better, it supposedly tastes better, but chemically it's worse.
I know that you've said prior to this that a blood test can either be used to find a disease and prescribe a drug or rebuild the body naturally. So is there an example that maybe comes to mind that you can share of a time where you've used labs to repair a problem nutritionally instead of making it or masking it rather with medication?
Yeah, it's pretty much every time we do a blood test. If I see problems with the ovaries or the adrenals or the thyroid, or the liver, the gallbladder, and all the rest, these are the things that basically look at and try to support so it doesn't get to that point of disease. That was the whole concept. It was like taking all the ranges of all the labs, the 72, and mathematically, kind of like reducing them so that this way you can see problems with health before it becomes pathology. And this is the way health problems start. You're born like, overall, most people are born healthy. So we'll take just the average person. So by the time you hit 15, 20, 25, biochemically, chemically, physically, and mentally, emotionally, your body's going through certain amounts of traumas. So, starts to go, south. But to get to like cancer and heart disease and the rest of that stuff, it's going to take a while. So first of all, you have, a normal physiological state of health. And then all of a sudden, because of like the chemical insults that you give the body, or physical and mental, emotional, everything starts to go more towards a pathological range. So you go from normal physiology to abnormal physiology, chemistry. And then from there, it goes into disease. So the doctors at this particular point, all their diagnostic tools only point when they have disease. Never like in this, this area where the body's starting to fail and it's called, normal physiology and not pathology. And those are the people that kind of fall between the cracks with the medical profession. They still come in, they don't feel good. Doctor run 1,000 tests looking for tumors and all this other stuff and doesn't find it because it's not at point yet. And these are the people that they need it the most because they're going into that, abnormal anatomy, abnormal physiologic state. And within a matter of months or years, it can go to the pathology really quick. So that's what you want to also explain to people. They need to step up to the plate and do it. They've been relying, and again, it's not so much today, but back in the 70s, there must have been about 5 or 6 different shows on TV about doctors. Marcus Welby, this one, that one, this one. And they made doctors look like, stars. And they were like, they can do this, they can do that, they can do this, they can do that. And the reality is that from that point forward, people think that the doctor is like the greatest thing since sliced bread. And he might be. But the reality is that he's looking at you from a pathological standpoint. If he doesn't see anything, he won't give you he can't give you the medication. But if he starts seeing the pathology, then what they do is they mask it. So, like example, if you're having a problem with cholesterol levels, let's say they're 350, 400, they put you on a statin. Well, the statin is going to definitely lower the cholesterol, but it can also cause problems with your liver. So, and it's also going to cause problems with production of chemicals that actually phospholipids that prevent the brain from short circuit and causing like a premature Alzheimer's or senility type situation. So they give you the medication, and the medication will tend to like quiet things down, but it allows everything to progress in a negative way. It's just going to get worse and worse and worse. But if you have to take the medication, then take it. I always tell patients that come in there in pain, they can't sleep, take some pain medication just to sleep. The goal is to like get you out of pain, and then you don't have to take that stuff anymore. Not to take that for the rest of your life, and that's what people do. Oh, I take this to go to sleep at night, or take this, pain every day. I have people that play golf, people that are Florida, 60s, 70s, 80s. They can't like go out and play without taking some kind of muscle relaxant, painkiller, some kind of anti-inflammatory to go out and play. It's like, you shouldn't have to do that to go out and play. Because eventually what's going to happen, that's not going to work anymore. So you're going to either have to go through, get shots or whatever they got to do that, but it's not going to work.
And speaking about this earlier of, communicating and teaching patients what labs really mean. So once you have someone who really understands their labs, how do you translate those numbers into daily choices that they make between the foods they eat, the supplements they take, even how they train or recover?
That's part of the blood chemistry analysis is once I figure out what's going on with them and we put together, a good list of foods that they should be, rest. So it gives them like kind of like a blow-by-blow description as to what supplements they should take and what foods they should, be eating and the rest. That'll basically, the whole holistic, view of what's going on with your body. How it works. It's like, okay, these are the labs that are out of range. These are the things that we have to do. And this is the kind of diet I'm going to put you on. It's called metabolic type 2 or 5, whatever it is. And look at these foods and tell me if you like them. And that's the key. And so this is, again, a good thing for the audience to know. Instead of listening to doctors tell you, don't eat this, don't eat that, don't eat this, don't eat that. Number one, look at your heritage. If you come from, let's say, an Irish background, an English background, you're a fatty protein person. You're going to do well with meats and stuff like that, potatoes and root-type vegetables. When you share that with a patient, they'll go, I love steak. I love potatoes. I love eggs, but I don't eat them. It's like, why? Because my doctor said it affects my cholesterol, which it doesn't. And it does to a small degree, not much. But that's what I do is I let them say, look, listen to the doctor with it. Look at the foods, look at these choices, tell me which ones you like. And they'll start saying, well, it's like, metabolic type 2 is more of a meat-eater type diet. It'll tell you, like, you can eat these vegetables, these kinds of fruits, you can have this, that, and the other thing. And then they can kind of like say, well, I can eat that because I do like it. And that's what I want. I want them to like love what they're eating, but it's got to do some, good for the body. It's got to be able to repair and rebuild it and all the rest of the things that it's supposed to do.
Absolutely. And many people, and myself included in this, kind of feel anxious sometimes after their lab tests because they don't really know what the numbers mean. So And I just went through this. I think I told you I had a physical. They sent me my blood work with no explanation. I'm like,
No, that's what they that's what they do, Layla. It's nothing new.
I don't know. I assume I'm healthy. There was no follow up. So, I'm sorry.
No, that's what they do. They'll do the blood test, and then sometimes the patient will go, "Well, I didn't get anything back yet. Did you call them?" Yeah, I called them 5 times, and every time I call, this didn't go over there and get you get the lab results. But because they don't share the information with the patient's like, what do I do with this now? I don't know what to do. It's like, yeah, my cholesterol's this and that's, and what does this mean? What does that mean? They don't know. So they become very anxious. And they're hoping that the doctor's going to basically, explain a lot of this stuff to him, and he doesn't. And if he does, it's going to be like, oh, take this drug or take that drug. And that's it. Oh, we'll do a follow-up in a few months.
Right. And so, how do you help your patients turn that data into confidence instead of fear?
Yeah, the consultations do it. And I have three. Don't forget, usually with them for maybe 3 to 4 consultations. Each one's a half an hour. So I'm with them for 2 hours. So I can give them so much insight. And I do it over like 3-week time frame, 4-week time frame. Where the first portion of it's like, okay, let's work on your diet. This is what we have to do as far as this is the metabolic type you are. These are the kind of foods I want you to do. And then we also have our own app called Body Sight. If they fill out all the stuff that they're eating, it tells me fat, carbohydrate, protein, and how many calories, and a lot of other different things I can look at. I can see exactly when they come in, if they're following what they're supposed to be doing. They're not. If they're following it, they're putting everything down, and you're starting to see changes. Whatever things that you want to utilize as far as weight or body composition, whatever it's all the monitors that you want to look at, that's what you're going to do. Look at those. So it's real, and plus they get a report. It's actually a whole booklet for them. It's all about their blood tests, all about their foods, all about all the things that they can do to get better. And like I said, after 3 or 4 consultations, they're pretty knowledgeable of what's going on. They feel comfortable. And then I'll tell them, I'll say, look, we will be doing a follow-up blood test in 3 months, 4 months, whatever it is going to be. And as long as we're going in that direction, sooner or later, once we do the blood test, we're going to get a good idea as to what's happening.
And how do you think that understanding our chemistry through blood work really affects the other two sides of the triune? So the physical and the mental emotional pillars.
Well, no, it's all in there because a lot of times if patients aren't eating properly, they have brain fog, they're fatigued, they can't think straight. So the whole mental emotional thing is like, really placed in havoc because that's what happens with a lot of people's nutrition. They just get this brain fog or they can't think and it's all because of like they're not taking enough protein, enough fat, or enough carbohydrate. And that's how it will affect mental emotional side. It'll also affect physical side. Just think about it this way. If you have an additional amount of weight that you put on your body, but you have all this physical duress on your body, we're not talking like 10 pounds, we're talking 40 pounds people put on their bodies. What it does to their joints, especially in their knees and ankles and hips, it puts a tremendous amount of stress in that. And plus, if they have a lot of belly fat, talk about this, the wind up would be that they'll start causing problems with their organs as well. Just all that fat in their belly compressing the organs and prevents circulation, lymphatic drainage, and all the rest.
Absolutely. Dr. Seema, I think, thank you as always for educating us. I think that this was such an enlightening conversation about how blood chemistry really can guide our daily choices and turn our confusion into clarity. So, thank you for just showing us that numbers aren't just data, right? Directions to a healthier, more personalized life. So,
I tell people all the time, I said, the thing about labs that I really like, labs don't lie, doctors do. Okay, so it's kind of like, you can talk all you want about the labs, but, you see the numbers, they're there. It's like, you can't refute them. The goal is to make sure that the numbers get better as time goes on.
absolutely. And being able to understand those numbers.
Yeah, and that's what happens. And they really get a good education, with this because I want them to have a lot of knowledge as to what's going on because the more knowledge they have, the better off they're going to be able to do what they're supposed to. And they start to see the differences, right? I had a patient come in just this morning. We went through blood tests maybe 2, 3 weeks ago, and part of it was weight. Okay, she's already losing weight. Okay, like that. She was also having she was eating a lot of carbohydrates, so her insulin was kind of on the low side because it was just abusing the pancreas, and insulin takes the sugar out of the blood. So she's not having so much a problem with blood sugar now, but it's just a matter of time before it happens. And I share all the information with them. So they start to see it. They start to realize, okay, these are things that I can do to counteract that. That's our goal with everything.
Absolutely. And that educational piece is so important.
Yeah. And that's that to me is the most important thing, because we were never educated on functional medicine. And it's really against, the whole, well, right now it's the whole medical establishment. It's just all together with the insurance companies, all these 3-letter agencies that, deal with your health and everything. And they push whatever it is that they want to push on you. They're not interested in really factoring the truth. It's like they're interested in selling drugs and surgery, and it's just unnecessary. It's causing a lot of money. Not only that, because I see it all the time, Layla, when you have a person that goes in for surgery and the surgery didn't work out well, the person's miserable. I mean, they're miserable for the rest of their life. This is not like, oh, it's going to go away tomorrow. It's like they're done. There's not much I can really do, because I'm not sure what the surgeon did. He might have made, a mess of everything. He was going in doing back surgery or hip surgery or whatever it was, a hip replacement, a knee replacement. And then it becomes a real big issue, because I don't know what he did. So I'm not even dealing with something normal or abnormal. And like I said, that's the part that I really dislike. I don't care, it's the first thing you should, do is like, doctor, do no harm. That's the first thing that every doctor understands. That's part of the Hippocratic oath. Doctor, don't hurt anybody. So many people come back more hurt than they were before. That's not good. It's not that the doctors, I'm not saying they're good or bad or good. It's like when you're dealing with, kinds of traumas like these people go through. I had a patient come in today. He had been heart surgery about 6 months ago. He was coming in complaining. He was starting to do some exercise, getting all this chest pain on his whole left side. And I'm like, it's like this whole rib cage is all locked up, because when they take a Black and Decker buzzsaw and they go right through your sternum and they kind of rip your whole sternum apart to take the heart out. I mean, if I punched you in the chest, that would hurt for a long time. I can't even imagine ripping your chest open. Then they have to fuse it, and they have to use, metal rings to kind of put it together. But it's all out of balance now. It's all out of whack. He was like, he couldn't sleep. He was having pain. So we did treatment on him. Within 2 visits, he's doing much better. But the whole thing is that I said to him, I said, Rich, you're going to have to basically really, this guy used to be a power lifter. So you're going to have to be really light with your workouts now, and not think that, okay, it's too light, because anything right now with the trauma that you experience is going to kind of pull things out of. He's getting the picture right away now. So he's starting to realize, like, he goes, you know what? He comes to me, he goes, I didn't have any problems. He says, they did open heart surgery. I mean, I got more problems that I can deal with. And it's funny, but it's not fun, because this guy, had to stay at, home for like 4 weeks, couldn't drive, and doing all of these follow-ups and everything. And he's like, I'm still having all these issues. So, and he's a great patient, because the minute he was through with the surgery, he was coming in here for treatment. He was getting acupuncture. He's really into nutrition and stuff like that. He goes, I don't even know why I did that surgery. I was fine. I said, I know you were fine. Didn't really probably have to do it at this point, because it was not life-threatening. Just make a few changes with your overall lifestyle and you'd be fine. And this guy would do it. He would definitely do it. He's one of these guys that really proactive.
Definitely. And I've heard that so many times of, oh, I shouldn't have done the surgery. Oh, I was better before the surgery. I think that, like you said, it's something.
Yeah, no, it happens all the time. Well, especially when they do a knee replacement, they got to do it again. That's a real fun thing. So, and I see that. I remember talking to a guy on the golf course one day. We were talking about knee replacements. And he goes, I had 3. I said, what do you mean you had 3? He goes, well, one of them failed. They had to do it again. So I said, we have 3 legs or something? And that was it. He said, no, I had to do it again. He said, I couldn't walk. I was in severe pain.
I think, again, thank you so much for this conversation.
You're welcome.
Definitely very enlightening. And everyone listening, be sure to follow the show so you never miss an episode. This was another great episode of Achieving Unlimited Health. And until our next episode, here's to your health without limits, and we'll see you at the next episode.
Thank you, Layla. Everybody have a great day and a great weekend.